Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Lauren Williams. I cover defense for Defense Systems and SCW. And today I have a really great panel. We're going to be talking about external threats and the rapid response that's required there. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce them. With me, I have Roy Horton. He is the Senior Manager for Cybersecurity Engineering for Noblis. I have Chris Johnson, who's the Director for Cybersecurity of the Cybersecurity Operations Center for the National Geospatial-Intelligence Agency. I also have Chet, who's the Technical Director for the 688th Cyberspace Wing for the U.S. Air Force. And before we get started and for me asking questions to my panel, I want to encourage everyone to send questions in as we're talking. I want to get as much involvement as possible. So pivoting to everyone today, I want to build on what Valerie was talking about. Something that was interesting that she said was the blending of threats with nation state actors using criminal actors to kind of shield their behavior. And I'm interested, and I'll start with you, Chris, what that means. Like, does this distinction change how an organization responds to an external threat?
Yeah, thanks, Lauren. So when we're talking about nation states, there are typically in the operations side, we rely heavily on tactics, techniques, and procedures in order to identify what those actors are doing against us. In a lot of cases, that often drives our real-time defensive actions, right? We'll monitor what they're doing, and we'll take actions in real time in order to better posture ourselves to defend against that. When they shift over to leveraging criminal organizations, that's an entirely different set of tactics and techniques that organizations, say like NGA, we're not used to dealing with, right? We're used to dealing with adversaries and nation states. We're not used to dealing as much with criminal organizations as, say, the financial industry is. And so it really is a shift for us to look at, okay, how do we think about the adversary differently in a world where we no longer have a clear understanding of who that adversary is?
Yeah. Chet, what are your thoughts here?
Well, from a military perspective, we really rely on intel to inform a lot of those perspectives from a threat aspect. So we are challenged with also the same issue of pinpointing where the adversary may be coming from or who the adversary is within a virtual environment. So there's many relationships and a lot of interaction that has to take place in addition to the data analytics in regards to the systems itself. We have to bring in the IT aspects of things. We have to bring in the intel perspective, as I mentioned, and also some of the offensive, and to merge all of those entities together to establish a full scope picture and perspective of what the threat actor is, what their intent is, and what systems or missions may be vulnerable to those activities, so that we can then pivot and adjust our operations and our systems as well to better identify those threat actors in the future, as well as preventing them from achieving their objective. And we also leverage our TTPs and other processes to enable us to be able to continuously improve at being able to do that, because it's an ongoing cycle, and being able to make sure that we're improving as our adversary is also improving their techniques against us. There was a report, I think, that came out in 2019 referencing CrowdStrike that stated that a nation-state actor can achieve compromise and lateral movement in a network in 18 minutes and 49 seconds. So along those lines, we have to be able to draw that line in the sand as well, and strive for 18 minutes and 48 seconds. And I would say that was a 2019 report. I would probably say the adversary is probably a few minutes better at doing that now. So that's our focus, of bringing all the entities together to make sure we get the right data analytics so we can take the right corrective actions.
Awesome. Roy, I want to get your thoughts on this.
Sure. Thanks, Lauren. I think, Chet and Chris both covered it quite well. I think, the real challenge that we have is that technology is both our friend and our foe in this area, because the fact that we're connected allows us to one person who's smart or a group of people that are smart can come together, and if they identify a vulnerability, it's like forcing water through a dam in a small hole, because the volume and the velocity that we're seeing of data and just the finite resources that Chet and Chris can apply to the problem means that we have to find a way that doesn't require workforce increases to address that. So, we have to be able to out-innovate and out-think folks when they're trying to come at us. And, as Deputy Director Cofield mentioned in her comments, the stovepiping of our organizations at times can work against us, because if you've got a criminal group that's actually fronting for a nation state, you may not recognize those connections until much later. And that's one of the challenges as we move into what we call information warfare, which is trying to blend all those factors together and attack us in ways that we're not expecting it.
Awesome. Yeah, I want to pivot to information or warfare and what how information plays into the cyber security landscape, particularly when we're talking about external threats. I'll kick it to whoever wants to pick up on that.
I'll break the ice on this one, Lauren. So what I find interesting about information warfare, it's a different area than what cyber professionals are used to when we think of cyber warfare. Right? When you think of cyber warfare, we think more in terms of like destructive attacks, actors coming in to exfiltrate data, things of that nature. Right? Information warfare really is an attack on trust itself. And that's kind of terrifying, because we depend on trust for a lot of things. We depend on trust of our users. We depend on trust from devices that are on our networks. Everything about a modern IT infrastructure sort of has this premise of trust, and information warfare modifies that underlying level of trust to the point where you don't know what's what anymore. Thinking non-traditionally, for instance, right? On the government side, we don't think much about on cyber, at least, brand management. It's something that our partners in industry are very much concerned about, and they have extensive programs and cyber professionals that are dedicated to monitoring the internet for specific attacks against their brand. Social media, other places on the internet, deepfake type videos that may paint them in a negative light. That is an aspect of cybersecurity that we'll say a traditional cyber defense analyst isn't going to be very well versed in and capable of just picking up on. It's a new discipline we need to start exploring and training our workforce on.
Chet, is that something that you're exploring and working towards?
Yes. My theory on information warfare is data plus intent is information. And so you can have pieces of data and collaborate and put that information together, and it can have and mean different things to different people. So as an analyst, you have to be able to not only identify malicious, but you have to identify the intent as well to find out what exactly was that individual going after, because you could probably identify their next steps in an attack. So it takes a little bit more awareness from an analytical standpoint and knowledge for our analysts to be able to corroborate across the various types of attacks and also the types of attackers to be able to find out what the intent was. So when we establish that perspective, you now have to tie that to the information that you're receiving. Again, as a whole, putting the data and the intent together, because data is the new perimeter, is how we're looking at this, and implementing a lot of things to help us focus more on data loss, as well as data access through zero trust. So there's a lot of attention being placed on that and making the information that's associated and created by data with intent, the focal point of how we go about not only deriving what the adversary is trying to do or what they're trying to degrade in our operations so that we can adjust and pivot in other areas, but also how we can prevent the information from being leaked. But also on the other side of that fence, how we could maybe misinform or counter intel aspects in regards to data by using data or information also in a warfare capacity as misguiding an adversary's TTPs, so that through deception as well. So the information warfare is key in all aspects of this, because again, data plus intent equals information. We're making data our new perimeter, no longer the perimeter around the DMZ or any other network perspectives, because now we're more mobile. The perimeter no longer exists in this world we're in today. And so that's our take on information warfare. It's broadening the scope and understanding exactly what information an adversary could be going after that can help us make decisions on how we pivot and how we adjust our operations and how we could potentially deceive the adversary through other efforts.
Roy, you brought it up, so I want to hear your specific thoughts on it.
Sure. I kind of layer everything just mentally so I can keep track of it. When you think about it, computer software data, that's all the foundational layer of what we do. The middle layer looks at things like critical infrastructure and health systems and safety and life. And then that top layer is exactly what Chris and Chet talked about, which is, the big nature of information warfare that's changed is now we're talking about trust. And I think, if you look at what's happening in our nation right now, we have been fundamentally attacked at the lower levels that's now bubbled to the top, where institutions that were trusted and assumed to be stable no longer have that reputation. And so there's a huge challenge from the standpoint of a foreign or domestic adversary. Attacking those sorts of capabilities can really have an effect on a nation. You look at just the simple concept of trying to get a vaccine for a pandemic, and people put out news that doesn't necessarily reflect the greater truth, and you suddenly have created some level of distrust that we can't afford to have in a situation like this. So being able to use those tools offensively against us is a huge challenge, and that requires us to have defensive tools that are fast in responding. I think Chet talked about the 18-minute flash to bang time between when something was occurring and when necessarily it was being detected. Well, that has to happen much faster, and so you're going to need automated tools that are going to be able to go and identify that and allow the analysts to do that higher level concept that Chet talked about, which is that whole concept of let me now have the data, now let me apply the intent, and let me generate information. And so, tools like Artemis and other capabilities that will augment an analyst's ability to work are exactly what's needed in this new information warfare age.
Yeah. And the 18 minutes, it seems like a long time actually to me, because there are like TV shows and things that are shorter than this. But all of you have touched on zero trust, and I want to dig into that and what that means and how each of your organizations have been able to adopt or implement it, and what challenges you face there, and what that means in terms of managing and responding to external threat. Chet, I'll start with you.
Well, it's knowing that understanding the landscape is key initially, and many times the challenge there is you rarely know or understand your current state when it comes to your cyber infrastructure. Knowing where all the vulnerabilities are, knowing where all the unauthorized wireless access points may be residing. So know thyself is one of the first steps in any warfare aspect. And many times we don't do a very good job of knowing that. We have a lot of blue force mapping aspects that we want to put in place so that we can best understand exactly what we want to protect, where our key information is residing, and how to manage and sustain and protect and procure things to help us better implement measures that can help us be more protected. Not having that good picture of that landscape makes it very difficult when you're looking at a new infrastructure to bring on top of that, to layer that, to make sure now that you're more protected. Because again, you didn't know what you still don't know what you didn't know before. So with zero trust, it's making sure that we're taking the perspective of defense and now moving it more towards a authentication or a profile or individual. And COVID has definitely highlighted during this time of teleworking, where many things are being done from a military standpoint that we never thought we would be able to do pre-COVID 19. That we are now taking a lot of those things on and those challenges, and we're getting through them at a very successful and surprisingly successful rate and pace. But for zero trust, it's understanding where you were before we understand completely what we're trying to transition to, and how is that going to enable or ensure that again the data and the information is still protected, because again that is the new perimeter. So what does this mean? So we're working with industry a lot in learning and understanding the mobile aspects and the remote aspects of accessing now our operational networks and doing things more from home. And zero trust is one of the aspects we're looking at helping us from mobile devices, as well as in the office systems as well, on how we can make sure that we have the right authentication, the right access, and we're able to make sure we have the right thresholds and IOC indications and warnings for those individuals or profiles that may be doing things outside the scope of what they should be. So we're leaning heavily on industry and the technology to help inform us on how we make this transition from our perimeter focused, really static networks, if you will, now to a very now more mobile, teleworking, remote aspect, and leveraging zero trust to do that. So it's a learning curve for us, but we're making huge strides to try to accomplish that. But it is the way of the future, we believe, as far as giving the right access to the right individuals to do the job they need to do.
Chris, how is NGA dealing with zero trust implementation?
So zero trust is an interesting concept. And I think if we were to ask Chet, Roy, and myself to define zero trust, you'd probably get three different answers.
Okay.
The fact is there is no universally adopted or defined standard for zero trust. The NIST Special Pub 800-207, it was just released and published in August, like last month. So we're still starting to just scratch the surface with our understanding of what zero trust is and means as a buzzword, as a technology. The other thing is that zero trust isn't something that you can go out and buy. It's not a technology that you can just go and purchase and implement in your environment. Zero trust is more of think of it like it's like an ideology for IT professionals. It's a commitment across the enterprise that requires more than cybersecurity professionals to say this is a good idea. It's highly complex, and when you're dealing with very, very sensitive systems that are interdependent, that are running critical defense and intelligence type operations, changes like zero trust could have significant implications and impacts to the mission. So I fully agree with Chet. Zero trust is absolutely the future. It's where we have to get to. I think that's been a theme of all of us in the course of the last 20 minutes, is that this is all about trust. And the fact is that trust itself is under attack. Trust itself has been compromised. And our only way in order to get ahead of the adversary and stay ahead of the adversary is to treat everything as untrusted.
Roy?
No, absolutely right. I think I come from a Department of Defense background. I currently work up at U.S. Cyber Command, and certainly the concept of zero trust is sort of, one of, you're going to have to operate in compromised or unsecure networks. So you have to be able to verify that who you're talking to, who you're sharing with, are the people that you intend to connect with. And you may have to do this across networks that you don't yourself protect. And so, Chris and Chet are both absolutely right. These are still new concepts, but certainly we've seen it here. The Cyber Command has been working very closely to figure out how do you advance this concept of a thing called zero trust. DoD is involved in some experiments to work through that, because they recognize we can't necessarily provide 100% security on the network. So our concept has to move to, how do I do trust? And of course, we had an instant opportunity to see how zero trust works, and I'm sure Chet can share some insights on this. When the pandemic struck and we sent all the workers that had been working in secure federal offices, sometimes with somewhat antiquated technology, and they all went home and started having to use Zoom and connect via email. And how do you continue to provide a level of security for information, even at the unclassified level, that protects sensitive activities and information? And so that is we've essentially started an experiment to ensure that we can do those things in real time. As I think, Chet, we've had close to 400,000 or 500,000 Air Force employees that have had to step away from their desk in the office and move home.
Yeah, the number has been astronomical in that focus, and again, something that we never believed that we would be able to do from a service perspective. We used to talk telework in the office sometimes, and they're like, "What? Are you kidding? You can't telework based on the information that we access every day." But I don't like the idea of a crisis causing change. A good change, maybe to some aspects, but it's definitely something now that we believe a few months ago that we will potentially do these types of things and end up in orange jumpsuits because we just violated some law or federal aspect of operations. But here we are. We're in the midst of it, and again, we're accomplishing things through people, through technology, and we're modifying the processes now to align to enable us to be able to do that, because the technology's already been there. Obviously, the people have always been there. So now we just need to modify those authorities, the processes, the TTPs daily, and we can still operate. We can still be effective.
We have a question from the audience. Mike Grady wants to know, how are each of your respective organizations detecting active cyber threats? And is BDP the framework for managing attacks? Also, I'm not familiar with BDP, so please, if you know what the acronym means, please explain it.
Yeah. But this is Chet, and BDP is Big Data Platform, and it all focuses and centers around data analytics and incorporating automation and not taking the human out of the loop, but putting them on the loop as far as being able to adjudicate activity across the network, across various sensors that are feeding into the big data platform. And we are in the process of incorporating that and leveraging that in the initial phases. Part of that, though, we've learned is you have to also restructure your missions and your organization. I mentioned earlier how previously we would have segregated DCO, OCO, Intel, IT folks in different areas, and potentially sometimes even in different buildings or states, even from an enterprise standpoint. But we have to physically and virtually start bringing those units together, and everyone leverage the data, which is the big BDP is enabling us now to apply more analytics, more algorithms, more machine learning, more automation to help the analysts to be able to leverage the exponentially amount of data that's out there, and help them to come to conclusions to what types of things may be normally unable to determine by a human, but very capable from an automation standpoint to help give us insights and indications of compromise so that we can focus on certain areas of the network. So it is definitely a huge leap forward to incorporate data analytics into processes that were previously very stovepipe, very unilateral in getting things done. So we're looking forward to continuing this transformation and leveraging more big data analytics to the BDP.
Chris, do you have any insights there?
No, absolutely. So data is the absolute future. We've, over the last 18 months, started to strategically pivot away from an over-reliance on a multitude of tools and capabilities, and we're really starting to focus on the underlying data. As Chet pointed out, we're simply overwhelmed, right? In the Security Operations Center, it's a game that you can't win, right? The alerts come in, they continue to increase by the day. So you've got volume of alerts going up. You've got an attack surface that's rapidly expanding, especially in the age of telework that we find ourselves in now. And we have to start over, right? We've got a very, very robust data collection platform, but we're going to go back to the basics, and we're going to look at actual use cases. What do we need to detect the adversary, right? Data governance in cybersecurity becomes critically important when you want to start doing things like machine learning and running AI models. If you don't have good data governance, you're not going to get the desired outcomes that you're expecting out of those analytics. In keeping with the theme of rapid response, this type of analytic is exactly what's required in order to get to a rapid response. You have to have to automate an incident response action on an enterprise, one that could be potentially disruptive. You have to have a high degree of confidence that action that's being taken, that's being automated, is correct. The fidelity has to be there. And the only way that you're going to do that is to go back to the basics, start unpacking your data, understanding every data flow, understanding what use cases those data flows support, and then building the analytics up to support those. One of the things that we've realized in the Security Operations Center at NGA is that it's not just about the security analyst anymore. We've made a really strong partnership over the last 6 months with an organization within NGA called the Data Corps. It's a team of really brilliant and innovative government data scientists and data engineers that now provide full-time support to the CISSP. So we have data scientists sitting alongside cyber analysts in an effort to try and understand the data, understand adversarial movement within these data sets, and how we can then start to customize and develop better algorithms and better data science to predict what they're going to do before they do it, and then put mitigations in place before it actually becomes a problem.
Roy.
Lauren, I'll just throw another word at you, and that is convergence.
Okay.
All these things that are coming together, what Chris talks about, what Chet talked about, the automation, the need for artificial intelligence and machine learning, it all drives us towards the simple fact that, seeing a light go from red to green or to yellow, or seeing that there's an alert on the network is no longer an effective way to do business. Now we have to move to, why is that light changing? What does it mean? What is the impact for the network? And our analysts can't get to those questions if we don't have a good automated system for helping them to discern all of, again, that volume and velocity of data that's coming in. I can't speak for our command here, but certainly you look at the recent foreign policy article by General Nakasone, where he talks about the need to advance network defense, and it's no longer, it falls into this whole big data platform concept, but it is really about trying to push the limit and bring that, another fancy buzzword, holistic approach to analysis. We had a lot of success in 2018 elections with a project called the Russian Small Group. Now we sit and we're trying to take advantage of that, where we took data scientists, you took intelligence analysts, you took cyber analysts, you brought them together to be able to counter Russian influence or attempts to influence elections. Now, how do you replicate that on an enterprise scale? It goes back to the concept that Director Cofield talked about in her comments, the workforce. We haven't recruited, you just can't go down to Walmart and say, I need 500 data scientists, and can you pick them up and bring them to, NGA by Thursday? Doesn't happen. We've got to now prepare our workforce and build tools to bridge ourselves to the future. And so that becomes one of those big things that we have to struggle with. And as Chris pointed out, if you haven't done a good job of developing your analytics, you can find some really stupid answers. You can go online and find examples of where people have used Post-it notes, and you stick it on a stop sign, and all those self-driving cars continue to drive right past that stop sign because something in that sensor wasn't right. So it's not just, well, let's throw some AI and ML on it and it'll be fine. You've got to do it in a smart way. And so I think all the organizations are struggling a little bit to prepare themselves for that future. But certainly I know here at Noblis, we've got some pretty smart people that are working that data problem.
Yeah, and this is Chet. And real quick, just to add something to that, it's being referred to as what we're hearing commonly across the services, a data strategy. What's your data strategy? And that will help establish and make sure and continue to evolve the data as it is injected into any data analytics platform that you may have by maintaining the integrity of a standard that's created through a good data strategy.
Yeah, I'll add, I think, Roy really hit it with the idea of convergence. It's the data revolution is creating a lot of interesting and new partnerships that we didn't consider before. I think maybe 3-4 years ago, I didn't know who our chief data officer was. And now in the world that we live in today, I met with him just a couple of weeks ago to have a conversation about data, about cybersecurity, about the larger ecosystem that exists within the enterprise, and how does cybersecurity fit into that, and how does the rest of the enterprise fit into cybersecurity? So it's definitely, cyber is kind of opening wide up, and I don't think there's really a good definition anymore that's going to define cybersecurity in the future. It's blurring all of the lines that we used to think of between various IT disciplines.
You guys this has been a great discussion, but you really struck a chord with zero trust. And so the questions and comments are rolling in. And I thought this was an interesting comment from Brooke Janey. She says, zero trust in information warfare is not a realistic approach. It's a technical/IT approach to network security. I liked Chris's view of it as an ideology, and in that context, it's a great idea. But in information warfare, you're fighting for trust, truth, credibility, accuracy, etc. Your mindset flips to approaches that help build trust, verify sources of information, repudiate misinformation, etc. That requires breadth of access, rapid analysis and assessment, and dissemination at mission speed. Does anybody have a comment or rebuttal to that take?
No, I think I'll add something that I think is important because I don't disagree with what she said. I think that she was very accurate in her statement. The piece that I think gets missed often when we start talking about zero trust is that we talk about zero trust from a network defense type position. But zero trust, in order to be truly effective, must expand and include the data itself. Right? Zero trust, when people talk about it, it's about trusting your people. It's about trusting the devices on your network. It's about trusting the services on your network. But it's also about trusting the data itself. And when we talk about trusting the data, the integrity of the data, the fact that the data hasn't been modified, that it's not, and not even that the data hasn't been modified, The other aspect of that is the data purposefully false? So you could be ingesting data that you believe is real, that's actually false, that could cause outcomes that you're not okay with. So I think that assertion is spot on. But I think zero trust going into the future, we can do more with it if we also start to uncover how do we trust discrete pieces of data, both from an integrity as well as a reputation perspective on the data.
And this is Chet, though. I will say that trust still can be very abstract in this environment. Okay, I mean, look at the Snowden situation. He had the authentication. He had the access authorities in place. He had everything, the clearances in place. But at some point, with all of the all of those aspects in place, from a security standpoint, there still was a risk there. And that trust was violated, even though it was established through the appropriate channels to allow that authenticated access that he had. So you have to be able to add a layer of technical on top of that to enforce that abstract perspective of trust. So technically, it is a solution, or technically there is a requirement to have a layer that can enforce the trust. And it's not just rules. You have to apply logical, practical thresholds to the network to identify when that trust is going to be violated, or if that trust is violated, and put proactive measures to identify when that happens. Or you're just you're trusting and hoping if you don't add that technical layer on top of that.
Yeah, I think Chet's spot on there. This isn't a magic bullet. This isn't going to solve all of the problems of cybersecurity. At the end of the day, it comes down to the actual human that's looking and processing the data. And I think, as Roy pointed out earlier, right, the challenge we're seeing in the current environment is that we're discovering people don't have the ability to rapidly identify misinformation and then treat it appropriately. That misinformation is treated as factual and is then used to inform other decisions and other steps in other processes. And that's terrifying, because there is no technical solution to that, right? That's about human behavior and them trusting a source or a piece of information more than another. And you can't technology your way out of that. That's something that we have to, I think that we have to retake a look at our school curriculums and start teaching kids now in the upcoming generation, how do they identify misinformation? Critical thinking skills, those must become a foundation of how we train the next generation, because it's something that wasn't an issue when I was a kid. Those aren't skills that I was taught when I was growing up, because this wasn't a problem. We didn't have the internet when I was growing up. But it's something that the upcoming generations absolutely must be trained to understand, or all the technology in the world isn't going to get us out of this problem.
I totally agree with Chris and with Chet. I mean, the challenge is that, critical thinking, as Chris pointed out, is become a lost art. But I think the other half of that is, I was likening some of the examples we've seen today of, I'm old enough to remember the Rodney King incident, where we had a man of color being beaten by LAPD on a video. Well, that got play only because television pushed it out. Today, the recent events involving George Floyd, Mr. Jacob up in Wisconsin, those moved at the speed of light, because networks are infinitely more capable of pushing information. Now you take that, you push a fake video out, and you can create all kinds of misinformation without ever having to leave the comfort of your mother's basement. So those are challenges that we have to face in this zero trust environment that are absolutely game changing from the past. I mean, I agree with my colleague Brooke. He's spot on when he talks about the fact that this is a mindset that we have to adopt as opposed to a magic technology. But it is also about enabling that with some technology, with training, like everything else. And, like Chet pointed out, you can have a perfect network, and then if you haven't got your humans properly vetted, it can create a significant risk for you. But sometimes you have to accept that risk if you need to move at network speed.
Yeah. This has been such a lively discussion. I have so many more of my own questions, but definitely you guys have so many questions left from the audience that we weren't able to get to. But I want to thank each of you for being here today and doing this. This was really informative, but we are at time. So I'm going to pass the baton over back to Troy.
Hey, Lauren?
Yeah.
Yes.
Hey, just one quick last question for me that I'm pretty sure everyone is on everyone's mind. You got everything else pretty close, but what happened to my eyes, nose, and mouth on my photo?
That is not my department.
Oh, okay, just curious.
You got the Heisman on that one, smooth. But thank you, Lauren. You did a great job of herding the cats, because I know Chet can be a handful at times.
Oh, you guys are great.
Chet, I like that. I like your hair though in your photo. That's really good.
That's an old photo.
Well, thank you, Lauren.
Hey, Roy.
Thanks to all of you gentlemen. Very much appreciated.
Roy looks very nice today, by the way. If he would just stand and take 20 paces back, I think that we'd all get another laugh.
Thank you all for that discussion.